Hello and welcome to Echo of Connections. I am your host, Gabe Hansen, with my mom, Dawn Hansen.
Hello, and we are here welcoming our special guest, Helene Dubov from Maryland, who specializes in EMDR therapy, and we're so excited to have her here. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I have been doing EMDR therapy since 1994. Wow. And I was lucky enough to affiliate with a psychiatrist who was very forward-thinking and wanted everybody who worked with her to be EMDR trained. And I didn't even know what EMDR was. It was pretty early in the history of EMDR, which basically started in 1986.
Wow.
So it was most prevalent in California, where it was started by a woman named Francine Shapiro, who had her own traumas but was going for a PhD in psychology and lived with a group of other psych students, and realized in short order, there's a story about her, that in short order she learned she had breast cancer. She tried to sort out all her feelings, and she did a walk in the park. And they talk about this walk in the park as being sort of quintessential in understanding the beginnings of EMDR. So when she was walking in the park and resolving some real heavy issues, she noticed that her eyes moved left to right, right to left, and she seemed to be resolving them. And so she came back to the other students and said, think of something that bothers you. And then she would put her hands, and wave it in front of the person's eyes to make their eyes move back and forth. And she found, lo and behold, that people were spontaneously resolving their issues. Wow. And she was quite brilliant. And I was lucky enough to be trained by her.
Wow.
And she then wrote a grant for the VA, because there were a ton of guys who, after Vietnam, went into the Redwood Forest and lived like pretty primitive guys, and only came back for their VA checks. So she would offer them EMDR treatment, and in a very short time, it was quite remarkable that these guys who had been traumatized by the war and disconnected from family started to go to job training, cut their hair, start becoming functional members again.
Wow.
So the VA sort of embraced it. And then she started taking it on the road to teach others in California. And it moved to the East Coast where I am, around 85, 86.
Oh, wow.
So that basically is the walk in the park that everybody talks about. And Francine Shapiro was with us. She died a few years ago. And when she came into the room and we were 1,000 strong, we'd all stand up and clap, because this therapy has changed lives, and changed the lives of those who actually perform this therapy. It has changed mine for sure.
Wow. And in what ways do you feel like it's changed yours?
Because before then, I started this work 40-something years ago.
Wow.
It was just talk therapy, and trauma is absorbed in the body. So talk therapy only handles one dimension of trauma.
Right.
And I don't think it's enough. So how it transformed my life was that I got to see people actually get better in very short order. And I didn't have that happen with just talk therapy.
Oh, so you could really see a difference once you started applying. Yes. Oh, wow.
It's gratifying to those who do this kind of therapy.
Absolutely, because you're really with people in some of their darkest times. So, and working their way towards the light is amazing.
Yes.
That's a great, I could see why all of you stood, the 1,000 to to be able to help somebody else.
To see it visually happen so fast, it must be great.
Yeah. So what does a process sort of look like? Do you, a person comes in and sort of how does that start? And then how long does it usually take?
It's a great question because at the beginning we didn't know very much.
Oh, yeah.
We really didn't. And we thought that we could pull people off the street who were traumatized and just do EMDR.
Wave some fingers.
Yeah, right. And do the cognitive piece, because EMDR is actually, there's a cognitive piece, and I'll explain that. But if you're not stable enough to do EMDR, there needs to be stabilization first. And we learn that over time. Okay, yeah. So people were going to the hospital because they weren't stable enough to actually do it. It's raw, you have raw feelings, and you have to be able to, what I call, and what I think people in my field call pendulate, meaning you have to have one foot into the here and now and one foot into the past, and you have to be able to go in and out. And if you get caught in the past, that is not reparative.
Yeah.
So you have to have that dual kind of attention to be able to heal. So we learned that there has to be stabilization first. And what does that look like? You need to have a visual safe place that you could go to pendulate to let's go to the beach now, or let's go to the mountains now. I mean, the person picks their safe place. Okay. And what I do is something called a genogram, which is what a lot of psych students learn in grad school, which is like a family tree. It goes back 2 generations, and we're looking for mental health issues 2 generations back, relational issues, physical problems, and also I find it extremely important to know if somebody has narcissistic parents.
Oh yeah.
And because that can influence you and your relationship. So I do that first, but not everybody does that in EMDR, but I do it. So that's what, and then I have them do a trauma history, and starting from even pre-verbal. I've done EMDR with people who didn't even have the words, but had trauma done to them as a baby.
Wow.
So it's all through. So what's been added over time is somatic, paying attention to the somatic parts of the trauma. So, where do you feel it in your body when you talk about this? Okay. And it's another way to access, even when you don't have words, the trauma.
And then for those that don't know, what does EMDR stand for? What are the acronyms?
Eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing.
While we recorded this episode of the podcast, the PC used to record it crashed, causing there to be a weird gap. That is why the beginning of the next piece has a little bit of a weird jump. Please forgive us, and we hope it will not happen again.
Then we make a list of traumas. Yes. And, the earliest trauma is the one we go for, because if you can resolve the issue with the earliest trauma, some of the other traumas kind of fall away. Oh. So with every trauma, you are left with a negative belief about yourself. And so unless you deal with that, that negative belief actually informs all your decisions after that in life. Wow. Right? So if you feel like you're not lovable, or you can't trust yourself, or you're powerless, it does inform your life. So that's why it's really important. And the earliest memory is probably the best memory. But some people come in with some real difficulties in the here and now, and if they're stable enough, then I go and do that, because it's more meaningful to them. So yes.
And so
so after that, then you do the processing, and we do something. We ask 2 questions. in the EMDR, there is, since we believe that there's a negative belief attached to every trauma, we determine what that negative belief is. And that piece is like cognitive behavioral therapy.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
And so we say, well, let's say I'm powerless. Something happened to them and they felt powerless. Then you'd say, when it comes to this scene, how powerful do you feel?
Okay.
And that becomes what we call evoke. And we try to measure it from one set to the next to see if we're going in the right direction. The other parameter that we use is subjective units of disturbance. How upsetting is this original trauma scene to you? And if it's done right, it's 10 is the most disturbing, it will come down. And sometimes it gets worse before it gets better because you're stirring up a lot of things.
Okay.
So, but because we have these parameters to kind of guide us to see if we're going in the right direction or we're hitting the right feelings, we can be assured that the person is heading towards healing.
And so when you're talking about that level 10, does that show as an emotional response or a physical or both?
It's interesting. So I ask how upsetting is the original scene to you now? And so then they give me a number and I said, where in your body do you feel it?
Okay. So does the EMDR process, is that when you start the eye movement part, or is
the eye movement is when we determine what the scene is.
Gotcha.
So we set up a scene, we set up the how disturbing it is, how true is it that you are whatever the negative is, how true is it, and then we start.
Okay.
And what does it seem like? I use something called pulsers and earphones. So the bilateral stimulation, which is what is the important piece to, instead of it being just eye movements, you can wave your fingers back and forth and create that eye movement, but you can also do a bilateral stim with earphones beeping in alternative ears and pulsers also sort of in conjunction with that. The reason I like that, but the research is mostly using the actual fingers going back and forth. But I like having the earphones and the pulsers because people can close their eyes. And sometimes that dual attention is a little bit hard for some people.
And as that process works, doing the left to right, what is that doing for your brain or your body? Or
so it started there is a guy who I think lots of people know in the field of trauma, but also in the field of the New York Times bestseller, which is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. So Bessel actually gave credibility to EMDR back in the 80s. He was a Harvard trauma sleep specialist, and he felt like there was something about the bilateral movement that was connected to REM sleep. And REM is when you do a lot of processing of unconscious material during the day. And so he actually gave EMDR credibility. So when you're traumatized, your neural networks freeze.
Okay.
And there's communication in different parts of your brain, particularly the limbic system between the amygdala and the hippocampus. The amygdala is where all the emotions are firing up. Hippocampus is learning and memory and resolution of memory. And that is exactly why kids who are traumatized have a hard time learning. It's the same neural networks.
Gotcha. So it freezes, and then you can't.
Yeah, the freezing of it. And so when you unfreeze that neural network with bilateral stim, that's what they're thinking. I don't think any of this is really proven yet, but this is what they're thinking. The brain is very mysterious and it's unbelievable how much we still don't know. But once those neural networks through bilateral stim open up, it's it's just cascading connections that are made spontaneously, because the brain, just like other parts of your body, left to its own device, will want to heal you.
Right.
So what I say to people is, please stay out of the way when we're doing this, the bilateral stim, and we're just, don't ask yourself questions like, oh, maybe I should have done blah, blah. Don't just let the brain throw out words, throw out scenes, and it will.
Mm-hmm.
It will throw out scenes that you need to see in order for you to come to some epiphanies.
Okay.
It's wild and it's wonderful.
And so I don't want to lose our time. I wondered if you have stories of examples of,
Yes.
of a...
Yes, they're my poster
Your poster child, your
My
miracle poster child. I love it.
Well, it's just that he had a horrific childhood where his father was a very violent drunk, and he was a baby, actually, but I happen to know some of the things that happened through his brother. So he really could not do well in school because he saw too many things, and his mother was often violently treated by the father. And so this baby saw all this, and basically thought he was stupid. And we were able to work through some of these traumas, some of it just somatically, like, where do you feel it? And it got him to some places, and he resolved it. And it's wild because he always thought he was stupid, but he started realizing that he actually was quite bright, and he never learned computers, but he wanted to buy one after about 3 months after treatment. And I sent him to Micro Center and told him not to fall for some salesperson getting him a souped up computer, just get a basic computer, because really his job was such a low level job because he just couldn't manage life. And he was also an isolate. He had no friends. It was very sad. So in about 3 months time, he got a computer. He taught himself computers.
Wow.
Taught himself in like 6 months time, he was a whiz. And they came in one time to see me and said, I would love a girlfriend. Oh. And so he learned to get on Match.
Okay.
And a year later, he's with a girlfriend. I think he's married now to her.
Oh,
and he just took off.
That's
that's
wonderful.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
So is he now a computer native, or is he?
I don't know. I mean, I don't want to bother my poster child.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Saying, where are you now? But,
that's awesome.
But if this podcast is for policemen,
and dispatchers,
I want to say something.
Yes, please.
About
go
that.
ahead.
When people are traumatized very severely, they actually, because we have a circuit breaker emotionally, like a house has a circuit breaker. And when we get overwired, we blow fuses, we actually leave the scene emotionally and we go to the ceiling. And we then observe ourselves being either abused or being, basically we leave. And then that part that goes to the ceiling becomes, this is all how we survive.
Right.
This is not pathological, terrible, horrible. It's how we survive because it's just too much to be in your body. And this is severe, but it happens. And so that part splits off. And it's called dissociation.
Right.
And a lot of people in the policemen and women see these people on the street because they're homeless. Right. Most of those people, and most people who are diagnosed with schizophrenia, also have trauma.
Yeah, we do with
terrible trauma. Yeah. Not just from having schizophrenia, but the trauma actually turns on the schizophrenia. I worked at NIMH and I saw I saw it. It was like 99% of people with schizophrenia had trauma.
Wow.
So when the people are on the street and they're doing crazy things, it could be a split off part of them, what we call the emotional part. And so if you can talk them down rather than do something really harsh, it could save a life, and these people have already endured enough.
And and actually that is our training and our philosophy is de-escalation, and we do work directly with a lot of people who are mentally ill who are on the streets. So we definitely appreciate that. And I think it's also important to recognize that officers and people who are working with people who have survived trauma end up with trauma themselves. And so sometimes we can find the compassion to see that somebody else is in trauma because we've had our own traumas. And so we can be like, oh yeah, it is really hard. You do disassociate and do check out on, officers who've had to, do stuff they don't want to. They have to take a life they don't want to. No officers I've ever met has ever wanted to cause anybody harm. And that, and just taking phone calls like at 911 and dispatching, we listen to the traumas happening, and we have to disassociate to keep doing the job. We can't process the emotions or whatever happened.
Well, what's happening.
Yeah.
There's a woman named Christine Courtois who in the field talks about vicarious traumatization. Anybody who's working with trauma can get trauma themselves from it, right? So police officers. And so it's important to do the work yourself.
Right.
It's important
to
do that.
And that's kind of what our whole goal is to try to recognize our own trauma, and then where do we go for help, which EMDR just sounded like you said, it's that combination of the what happened and then a physical resolution, because it is, I didn't really pay attention to closely until the last maybe 5 years about where do I feel it, I've
actually never thought about that before.
Yeah, like where's the trauma or the stress, or like why am I upset? How upset am I? I never really thought about how upset I'm, but that sounds like a good place to go on a self-check.
Sometimes the somatic piece is really a part of you that is speaking.
So when you
I know that's
what does somatic piece mean? I'm not familiar with what that means.
So when you say you feel it in your, people feel it in their throat, a tightness in their throat, they feel tension in their shoulders, they feel it, and there's something called the vagus nerve, and it's from the head to the gut, and so that's where people somaticize or feel the feelings.
Okay.
So oftentimes if what we call the apparently normal part, which is the adult part, the executive part, is ignoring these wounded parts, the wounded part will start expressing through the body. And once the wounded part is listened to, and there's a compassion for the wounded part, this is all within us, right? Then those somatic issues go away. But if it's ignored and it's chronic, you can get an autoimmune disease from that.
Gotcha. So we have to deal with our trauma, or our trauma will deal with us in one way. Is that accurate?
Oh, beautifully said.
Yeah.
Beautifully said.
Okay. That's fantastic. Wow. And so is there things that we can do as individuals? One of the questions I had, how do you find a good EMDR therapist, and how do you know if they're good, or, what do I look for in my shopping?
Well, there is a international association and a website. It's EMDRIA.org.
And I will link that. Okay.
And there is a little window on the top that says find a therapist in the country, and probably internationally too, but basically by state, you put in the geographic location, and you look for somebody who's certified or a consultant. They put in some time doing this.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah. And of course, if somebody's been doing it for a while, they know how to do it. And unfortunately, some people say they know how to do it, and they're not following protocol. And I have found that it is essential, even though I've been doing it for 28 years, to follow the protocol. It's there for a reason.
Gotcha.
And so,
Yeah, it sounds very important. The process, the
Right.
overall process you're explaining sounds very important
Like
to
there's
follow it.
definite steps. Yeah.
Yeah.
and not everybody does what I do, but they do follow up the EMDR protocol.
Okay.
That whole thing of the genogram is my thing, but I find that when I understand the intergenerational transmission of trauma, it makes it easier. When I understand where the narcissist is and where there might be emotional abuse, it just makes it easier to target what the traumas are.
It's interesting, and the narcissistic aspect.
I understand that because I've gone through that.
Yeah, we were. What is that? What do you, I guess what I'm looking for is what is a good, clear definition of a narcissistic parent in your life, or what does that look like? Is there a particular look to it, or is there?
Well, there's something called covert narcissism and overt, and then we can. I know people are of different political stripes here, but Trump is certainly a good example of. Well, in the psych field, we call him a malignant narcissist, but not everybody would agree with that. So that is something that's particular to me because I see how narcissistic parenting has incredibly wounded people. It's when the person needs to get adoration from their children, and the children are brought up to do that without their needs being met.
Gotcha. That's a good definition.
To varying degrees. And I'm not talking narcissism in the DSM. I'm just talking about it as sort of a personality type, but not in the DSM.
Gotcha. Sort of a maybe.
There's different degrees of narcissism, clearly, right?
Yeah.
And living in a home, living in a home with a narcissist, I think it's fair to say there's varying degrees depending on the time frame and depending on the situation. But that definitely rings true where you have to, the child has to be more.
Yeah. And there's also something else I wanted to say. It is very hard to not have somebody be the focus of a family's attention and energies if somebody has an addiction of any sort or a chronic illness of any sort.
Right.
I mean, it's not like they mean to be, but families organized around those two,
right,
or mental illness of any sort.
Right.
And so it's not just somebody born to who happens to feel like they need constant adoration. So there's a lot of it's a complex matter, but
it really strikes the nerve with us for sure. We both come from.
I'm understanding everything you're saying.
From
personal experience.
From personal experience, we're both like, oh, yeah, that really rings true.
There's a great guy on YouTube.
Okay.
Lester Carter.
All right,
okay.
He's on YouTube, and he has devoted his life to explaining how to deal with difficult people who have narcissism, what to do if you're in a relationship and you're feeling like you can't deal with it. He's just great. So I would definitely go to him for some insights.
We like the YouTube. We do a lot of learning on YouTube. That's awesome. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else any other references we should look into? I think you have answered all of my questions, and I loved your miracle story. It does give a lot of hope for all of us who have those tendencies, have a trauma, or, I know for me, when I've had through, not too long ago, we had a pretty upsetting call, and there's that wounded part who doesn't, I just want to curl up in a ball and hibernate.
So when you feel that it's important to, since you don't have a mommy and daddy to placate you and soothe you, you need to be the mommy to yourself. You need to actually hold her. there's something called the butterfly,
Mm.
and they taught this to kids in Mexico when there was a landslide and they wound up being orphaned, and there was a bunch of them, and it was just, doing this and saying, I will be okay.
Crossing your arms
Hugging yourself.
across your chest and then patting
Well,
each
no,
shoulder.
it's an alternative way. See what my fingers
Yeah, you
are
do
doing?
a shoulder.
Oh, you tap your shoulders.
Yeah, he couldn't
Okay.
quite see.
Yeah, no, I'm
called
off
the
camera as well. So.
So
That's okay.
so
It's your mom will teach you, but it's about
Pat
My mic's in the
your,
way. So.
oh yeah,
yeah, it's called the
the
butterfly.
butterfly.
All right.
And you can also tap alternatively on your thigh
Mm.
and just say positive things to yourself, like it will be okay.
It will be okay.
I've been here before and I've done okay.
I've been here before and I've done okay.
All right. Yeah.
That's awesome.
All the things a good parent would say.
Good. We have to reparent ourselves. There we go.
I mean,
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for your.
and then I
You
actually
question?
have a question.
Yeah. I should turn the
Well,
camera. so you
no,
see-
I don't think you have to. It's just, oh,
There he is.
Oh,
Wait,
wait.
there he is.
hey, the idea of comparing traumas.
Okay.
Like, I don't know how to phrase it right, but people subconsciously compare trauma. Like, if they hear someone else's trauma, and they're like, "Ooh, that sounds way worse than mine," and then they don't deal with it because that person's worse.
Oh.
Okay.
How do you deal with that or overcome that, or like I don't know, like
Yeah.
I think that the comparison of trauma is a way to not deal with your own. I think
Oh, yeah.
it's like denying the impact of your own trauma on your own body and your own emotional states.
Mm.
And I think, I always say there's no right and wrong of feelings. Feelings just are.
Yeah,
And and to accept the fact that that it was a trauma, even if, I say one of my earliest traumatic trauma patients came in. She was very young. She was only about 20. And she said that the trauma happened in 4th grade when she was on the schoolyard, and they were divvying up teams and nobody wanted her.
Mm.
oh
And for some people that would not be a trauma. For her it was a trauma. And the negative belief is that no one loves me, no one wants me. And that stayed with her till she was 20, until we did that. So trauma, let's define trauma. I think that's a very good
point.
Oh, yeah.
thing to do. Trauma is anything that roils in your head over and over again.
Mm.
oh my god,
Mm.
It's not processed.
There you go.
It's not being
such a
processed.
great way of putting it. Yeah.
Uh-oh.
So
We're about to run out of time, so we have 10
I
minutes.
see that. I see that.
I think we're about done anyway.
Yeah, we have just a couple minutes, but I love that about what you said about trauma. The
Yeah.
other comparison I heard this recently was somebody had said it's like a spoon stuck in your garbage disposal that won't come out. That's a little more rude, crude, but I like the rolling around in your head.
So. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you're on a rat's wheel.
Mm.
It goes over and over again, those scenes, the same scene. And it could be something that another person wouldn't find as a trauma, but for you it is. And that matters so much. For you it is.
Yeah, I guess that's when you would need to be the mom or dad to yourself and be like, okay. I mean, we wouldn't want our children to suffer with any kind of pain. Like if it was your leg that hurt, we'd want you to fix it. And if there's an ongoing thing that bothers you in your head, we'd want to comfort ourselves, comfort that person.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, a good question. I guess trauma does get compared sometimes.
Well, I've personally done it.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to. You're like, because trauma affects everyone differently, and or like different events affect people differently. But like you hear someone's story, you're like, oh my god, they went through. That's so bad. Like there's no way that like what I'm going through is anywhere close to what they're going through, and so
yeah.
in a way, I guess it is a way just to like avoid dealing with the problem. Yeah.
And I guess it comes into the scale that you'd asked, like, is it a 1 or a 10? Because if it's a 10 to you,
Yeah.
that's still a 10.
Yeah, deal with it. Yeah.
Right? It's still
Right. Absolutely.
Well, thank you.
And yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off anymore. So thank you ever so much for your patience and your knowledge and your experience and how many people you've helped. I know you've helped us already.
I want to try EMDR.
Right? Right? We're going to go find us a qualified person.
I want all my friends and family that need it to get it. There's also for those who are veterans, there's Give an Hour, and if they're afraid of it being stigmatizing to go to therapy, they could get a free counselor and Give an Hour. Just wanted to state that.
Excellent.
If they have a military background and their families too, so money shouldn't play into that.
Right. Right. That's a great point.
Yeah.
And there's lots of resources, and we definitely want people to get help if they have trauma. And it really is valuable to realize that it doesn't matter if it bothers you, it's a trauma. That's very powerful.
Yeah, that's a good message.
Yeah,
to send out.
If it bothers you and it doesn't, we're not here to scale it.
You know what that means? That means that you have a negative belief about yourself.
Oh yeah, I do.
And that needs.
Yeah, fundamentally, right? Yeah, we need to fix those. We don't. Yeah.
I think I'm starting the process now.
Yeah.
Well, because we just got away from the abuser, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
The process can begin.
The process begins. Yeah, when healing can begin. I thank you so much, Helene. You've been a fantastic guest, and
thank you very much.
I couldn't ask for anything more. That was just beautiful, and I treasured.
I totally appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk about something that I'm pretty passionate about. So anyway,
we're getting the word out. We will get the word out definitely. There's yay.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Donnie.
You too. Have a great day.
Have a great day. Yeah.
Yes. Bye. No wave. Thank you for listening to Echo of Connections. You can find us on Audible, on Amazon, Spotify, our YouTube channel, iTunes, and anywhere else you can find your favorite podcast. You can check out behind the scenes, bio of our guests, and blog entries on our website at echoofconnections.com. Goodbye, and thank you for listening.